So, Mr. President, I would like to welcome you in this place and tell you again how honored we are that you have accepted to talk to us tonight. And as you know, and I'm sure that some of our friends here know that 22 years ago, your mother, who was president of the Philippines, too, gave also a speech at Ifri, but it was under me. I was still, because I am the father of this place, but it was not in the same room. And I think that in the last 22 years, we didn't have so many, actually, high authorities from your country who addressed us. You yourself, Mr. President, you are recognized as a very remarkable statesman. You have been in office now for 4 years. It is your 4th year. And, but your family, of course, is also one pillar, if I may say so, of your country, and you represent a lot. So thank you very much again, and I am now very pleased to give you the floor, Mr. President.
Thank you for the very kind words, Monsieur Romombrial. Secretary Albert Rosario, members of the Cabinet, Philippine Cabinet present, Ambassador Maria Teresa P. Lazaro, members of the Institut Français de la Relation Internationale. Honored guests, good evening. Separated though we are by great distances, France and the Philippines have a strong and enduring connection. The shared value we give to democracy and to defending it. The battle cry of your own revolution, liberté, égalité, et fraternité, spurred thousands to action around the world, including a Filipino clerk named Andres Bonifacio, whom we honor as the father of the Philippine Revolution. The links between our countries did not end with our respective revolutions. They would emerge stronger after a dark period in my country's history. My parents were among those who fought against the Marcos dictatorship, and for that, my father, Senator Benigno S. Aquino Jr., gave his life. After his death, my mother, Corazon C. Aquino, and the rest of the nation collectively took on the fight for the future of the Philippines. Like their compatriots in France many years ago, millions of Filipinos took to the streets, this time armed with only prayers and songs, in protest against their oppressor. Through the will of the people, democracy was reclaimed for the Philippines. A true champion of democracy, France was one of the first countries that recognized the newly formed democratic government of the Philippines after the peaceful People Power Revolution, recognizing our achievements and, more importantly, the achievements of our countrymen. Your government conferred on my mother the Legion of Honor. A generation later, we are engaged in a different kind of fight, one against poverty and corruption. Ways implemented simple but crucial reforms. For instance, by cutting down the required documents for bidders from 20 to 5, opportunities for corruption were minimized. By removing the requirement to submit a letter of intent, collusion was eliminated because bidders did not know who they were competing against and thus could not rig the bidding. Ultimately, by demanding professionalism at all levels and at all times, we were able to get what we refer to as the 5 Rs. The right projects implemented by the right people for the right quality and the right price, implemented right on time, if not earlier. On a larger scale, we found it necessary to re-examine our budget. We could not allow the continuous funding of projects which had questionable or zero results. As such, we employed zero-based budgeting so that each and every peso would have an equivalent and tangible benefit on the lives of our countrymen. Together with ensuring that government would no longer be a party to wasting our people's hard-earned money, we introduced landmark reform to agencies once known as hotbeds of corruption. For instance, our Bureau of Customs was given a fresh start through the appointment of a new commissioner and deputy commissioners. Such reforms made its way to the rank and file of the agency. We kept closer watch, especially for those on the front lines. Previously, security guards used to act as cashiers, and warehousemen became examiners, a sure recipe for thievery. As we examine the state's resources, as we maximize the state's resources by improving our systems and empowering the bureaucracy, we also put an end to the era of impunity. by making sure that those who committed wrongdoing in office will be held to account, regardless of how lofty their positions were. In fact, my predecessor in the presidency, who was accused of crimes against the nation, is under hospital arrest right now as she faces two unbailable charges. Our commitment to good governance is now bearing fruit. Money that once went to the corrupt now goes to massive investments into the Filipino people, as exemplified by our budget for social welfare, health, and education, amongst others, increasing in multiples. The scope of our National Health Insurance Program, or PhilHealth, was expanded, especially for the poorest of the four common ailments, but for catastrophic ones as well. Diseases like leukemia and breast cancer, for instance. The number of households enrolled in the Conditional Cash Transfer Program, our flagship poverty reduction initiative, has grown by leaps and bounds, from covering less than 800,000 households when we assumed office in 2010 to more than 4 million households today. More recently, we expanded this to include households with children not only in the elementary ages, but up to those studying in high school. We did this because a study revealed that high school graduates earn up to 40% more than those who just finished the elementary level. For each of these 4 million households, the primary condition asked of them was simple: keep your children in school. In exchange, they will receive support in the form of regular cash grants. Filipino school children now have access to stronger foundations for learning, thanks to the K-12 program, which puts our education system at par with international standards. Enriching the quality of our basic education system includes meeting logistical needs. Our administration has effectively addressed the inherited backlog in school seats, classrooms, and textbooks left to us by our predecessor. All this, of course, is in preparation for the education they will receive from universities, colleges, and technical and vocational institutions, which are all empowering our countrymen to be increasingly employable, and as industry and government cooperate to ensure that the courses students take will match the actual skills needed in the job market. We are seeing our reforms bearing fruit. Look at the numbers. From April 2013 to April 2014, the latest study has shown that 1.65 million more Filipinos hold jobs. From 2012 to 2013, 2.5 million people have moved above the poverty line. Our first task was to help the poorest of the poor overcome poverty. Now we are also capacitated to help those we deem the near poor, meaning those who have barely moved out of the poverty line. By addressing their vulnerabilities, and we hope they need not fear that a catastrophic event, such as a major or natural calamity, will pull them, major illness or a natural calamity, will pull them back below the poverty line. All these investments were made to ensure that the Filipino people, who are our greatest competitive advantage, are enabled to make the most of opportunities born of renewed confidence in our country. Indeed, good governance has redounded to a more capable and more active citizenry, full of hope and optimism, and the combination of an increasingly competitive population and a sustainable, prudently run economy has gained global notice. This was affirmed by the three major credit ratings agencies in the world, Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor's, which gave the Philippines investment grade in 2013, the first time ever in our country's history. Your own French export credit agency also upgraded our country's risk rating. Most recently, Korea's National Information and Credit Evaluation Ratings Incorporated raised us to investment grade. All this happened at a time when agencies have been very conservative with their evaluations due to an uncertain global economic climate. In fact, even in a period when various countries were being downgraded, the Philippines emerged as the world's most upgraded sovereign. On top of this, since we took office, we have consistently climbed global rankings of competitiveness. Most prominently, perhaps, from 2010 to 2014, we went from 85th in the World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Report to 52nd, making us the most improved country in that span. It is clear good governance is good economics. Again, let me emphasize that this is not an empty pronouncement. Our business process management sector continues to mark impressive growth. Manufacturing has rebounded impressively, and tourists all over the world are flocking to our beaches and cities, seeing for themselves how truly it is more fun in the Philippines. Excuse me. Given the unprecedented confidence enjoyed by our country, we expect 2015 to be a banner year. After all, the factors that can allow us to build on our momentum are in place. We will be entering a demographic sweet spot by 2015, which will last for around 35 years. We have been investing in our greatest resource, our people, resulting in an expanding productive labor force now even more prepared to seize all the opportunities. We have a strategic location and vast potential to be a crucial hub of trade, investments, and services. Our economic turnaround is especially significant in light of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations formally integrating as an economic community in 2015. This is a milestone in the evolution of ASEAN as we pursue the common prosperity of our peoples and foster the peace and stability fundamental to continued development. Naturally, this opens doors of opportunity to our European friends as well. As a leader in many cutting-edge industries such as renewable energy, public transport, and aerospace, France, for instance, together with other EU member states, will find far greater potential for enhanced engagement with our country and our region. This is a timely development given the recovery of markets in the Western Hemisphere. Increased cooperation can only redound to a healthier global economy and the promise of further growth and development for all. As individual nations in a diverse world, we have everything to gain when our relations are characterized by harmony and a healthy respect, not only for each other, but more importantly, for the rule of law. This is in line with what my father once said, and if I may paraphrase his thoughts, if you tolerate the abuse of the rights of one, it sets the stage for the abuse of your own rights. As responsible members of the international community, it is our duty to uphold the rule of law in every instance and to reject might and power when they seek to subvert the rule of law. The Philippines has consistently expressed its concern on rising tensions in our part of the world due to maritime and territorial disputes in the South China Sea. As has been reported by international news agencies the world over, there is an emerging pattern of aggression bent on establishing new realities at sea and in the air. These violations of international law pose a danger not only to claimant countries, but also to the entire international community since freedom of navigation and unimpeded lawful commerce are threatened. This is why we are advocating a peaceful resolution of the dispute. To do this, we are taking two tracks. First, through promoting the formulation of a binding code of conduct, and second, through arbitration, a mechanism which is embedded in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. We continue to invite other claimant countries to join us to accelerate the resolution of this very long-standing dispute, which has lately caused much tension in our region. The international community as a whole stands to gain what left behind on the march to progress, and in so doing, perhaps create opportunities for other peoples as well. France has displayed a keen understanding of this belief, most recently and prominently in the aftermath of Typhoon Haiyan, recognized by some to be the strongest typhoon to ever make landfall and devastate the country. It left a large part of our country in shambles. Lives were lost, families separated or displaced. The need for both immediate and long-term recovery was enormous. And in the face of that enormous need, the entire world, France included, gave an overwhelming response. All levels of society, from the French government down to companies and non-governmental organizations to ordinary French citizens, demonstrated their generosity to their Filipino friends, and we are truly grateful for this solidarity. Ladies and gentlemen, climate risk and threats to the rule of law are only some of the challenges that today's world sets before us. Whether in the experience of our forebears in the French and the Philippine revolutions, whether in our people power revolution or the relief and recovery efforts immediately after Typhoon Haiyan, it has always been clear to me that our efforts are stronger and that the opportunities we create are vaster, deeper, and have a greater impact when we find ways to increase cooperation. Whether in the political or economic sphere, we continue to find new avenues of positive engagement that may help us confront the challenges of the future. This is true in our work to promote inclusive growth and sustainable development, to enhance peace, security, and the rule of law in interstate relations, and to combat climate change. As a global community, we have to make a choice. Either we combine our strengths and tackle our shared challenges together, or fall individually to the problems that threaten all of us. Asia, Europe, and the rest of the world need to work together to ensure a stable environment and a brighter future. I believe that a reinvigorated Philippines-France relationship can contribute greatly to achieving this endeavor. As partners who have worked together though perhaps indirectly for centuries. To preserve democracy and its fruits, the Philippines and France can continue to stand together, working towards the benefit of our citizens and of the entire world through a renewed commitment to the values our nations hold dear: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Thank you for your attention. Good evening.
Much, Mr. President, for this very rich speech. I'm going to launch the discussion. Well, there are many possible questions. Let me ask two, more or less randomly. One is on the South China Sea. You mentioned the importance of resorting to international law, and but the trouble is that international law works when the different parties to a conflict have a political will, to solve the problems. But international law, to my knowledge, has never solved any problem at all when the political will is lacking. So my question to you is, how do you assess the political situation as far as the South China Sea is concerned, but more generally the disputes in East Asia, which are potentially may look quite dangerous, not only for the stability of East Asia itself, but perhaps beyond. That's my question number one. And question number two, since you insist a lot, and rightly so, of course, on the negotiations on climate change, which are totally unique also in historical terms. So it's the first time the so-called international community is taking care of such huge problems involving so many actors. So how do you assess, Mr. President, the climate, not the climate as the subject of climate change, but the political climate, and do you feel that there could be some really positive step forwards in the foreseeable future?
Well, so I think in a general answer to both questions, what transpired in the past should not be inhibiting us to what we try to aspire for in the present and in the future. So let me answer directly the first question. When we say international law, there is a convention adopted by the UN called the Convention on the Law of the Seas, to which both China and ourselves and other claimant countries are party to and have ratified. The bottom line is we, in this document, have agreed on duties, specific duties, obligations, and entitlements. And if at any point in time, any particular state can unilaterally say, okay, with this agreement that took so long to build can be abrogated without actually abrogating it, then one perhaps should really wonder what is in store for the rest of humanity. So what we have done as a country is to seek two processes. One is through ASEAN, which has China as a dialogue partner, which has 4 of the 6 claimant countries, especially for the Spratly Islands group. And we are saying that in 2002, we tried to come up with a code of conduct on how to govern ourselves, specifically to manage tensions peacefully in this area. In 2012, we in the Philippines raised it in Phnom Penh, the question of what has happened to our drive to come up with that binding code of conduct, given that the failure in 2002 led only to a statement of general principles that are not binding, and especially given the light of the increased tensions. And fortunately, I think there was consensus. There have been preliminary dialogues towards establishing that formal code of conduct. So one cannot say that by avoiding this particular route, we could have had another resolution of the conflict. There might abandoning our taking this particular route has refocused all the parties' attention to trying to come up with that binding code of conduct. Second, we went to arbitration primarily, again, to restate what are everybody's entitlements and what are everybody's obligations, so that there is clarity, there is no confusion as to whose theory should prevail. And if one wants to be seen as a responsible member of the international community, then that has to be based not on a particular definition of the truth, but the truth as acknowledged by everybody who are party to this particular conflict. Climate change, even in our country, I think there is intense commitment to battle climate change, but the intensity has had the emotionalism tampered down. We are, at least in our country and in other fora, they have already been discussing on the practical considerations and trying to attain goals in towards minimizing carbon emissions that take into consideration doable goals as opposed to impossible goals. So from two parties talking above each other's heads, we are now talking and people are listening, and hopefully, especially with this UN Global Climate Change Summit being held next week, everybody will have to put on the record precisely how committed or what their commitments are towards addressing this particular concern. We are also hopeful that perhaps before the effects of global climate change were relegated to countries like the Philippines, which has a very low carbon footprint but bears a disproportionate amount of the burden, or other areas that are less heard or least heard from. When we now have very, very serious changes in climates, even for the most developed countries, who are also very hard pressed to address them when they do occur. Perhaps this is the perfect timing, really, to push for concerted action in a problem that seems to be exacerbating as the years go by.
Thank you very much. To ask the first question, they are shy. Alors, même Sophie, la Boisseau du Rocher, là que je l'ai aperçue, there is.
Good evening. It's quite live, but I'm very happy to put the first question on the table. From your own experience and observation, what could be the most sensitive argument to drive China to respect the rule of law and bring it to a very constructive dialogue with ASEAN? Because what we observe from now is that ASEAN didn't succeed in concluding this code of conduct. That's my first question. And my second question would be, what are Filipino assets if Beijing decide to go on with its so-called historical claims in the South China Sea? I'm not sure the United States would like to be involved in this dispute and in a possible conflict. What is your joker, I would say? What is your position? What is your how would say option? You know. Thank you.
Again, the answer seems to be, in a sense, the same for both. China's, like any other country, I think China in particular has had growth of something like 10% for the past decade. There's been dramatic changes in the quality of life for the Chinese citizenry. This has been fueled primarily by their engagements with the world outside of China. Now, question is, if everybody that they traded with, and before I say that point, let me put something on the record. In 2011, I had the state visit to China, and we had agreed by then President Hu Jintao that the disputes in the waters are not the sum total of our engagements, and we stressed that our relations in China, or Philippine relations with China, see China as having a lot of benefits. For instance, they send to us about 200,000 tourists at that point in time. We sent to them 800,000 tourists. They have a 1.3 billion population. We have again, 100 million population, and we just reached this number now. We had direct investments from Philippine companies to them of $2.5 billion. They sent back to us about $600 million. So we ask, if all of our efforts are focused towards improving the lot of our people's lives, tensions do not contribute to attaining that goal. So it goes back. No? What you must remember, it's not only the Philippines that has tensions with them currently. I think we read the same media. We know exactly who has issues and tensions with them. So one has to ask. We'd like to think that they are reasonable and pragmatic individuals. They have the same goals, and it cannot be it cannot be attained if you increase instability in a region where, with one estimate says, this particular body of water carries 40% of world commerce. Okay. Now, what are the Philippines' options? When they say that they are worried about our intentions, no, and the threat we pose, I point out that almost laughingly, even if we were to engage in a boxing match with them, no, there's 13 of them for every one of us. No. Now, we talk about military might. The Philippines has tried, you know, in the debate between guns and butter, the classic economic question, has wanted to develop or send its resources more to the butter side of the equation than to the guns. Now, excuse me. We have 132 ships, roughly, in our naval forces to guard 36,000 kilometers of coastline, let alone the EEZ. They're not wooden sailing ships, but they're World War II vintage. We have correct that. We have no fighter aircraft in our inventory. We have no bombers, for that matter, in our inventory. We are acquiring the skill sets again to be able to fly jets, fighter jets. No? Fighter jets, by definition, will not have a large, the naval people call it legs, the distance, the range to be able to travel. No? Now, if they do decide to attack us, and I don't think, and I have to be very clear about that, I cannot see the logic for them to do so. There is no amount of spinning the story that will justify such an action. No? So we go back. If their prosperity is essentially linked to their access to the world, no, doing the worst possible scenarios will not redound to their being able to have as free an access with the rest of the world. Or if at the very least, it will prove to be, shall we say, a hindrance to their gaining access to trade, which they so need, like we do. Thank you.
The French did not try to sell you Rafales? No? Well, perhaps, Mr. President, to follow on the same question, you know. Broadly speaking, there are two kinds of orders of possible in the world level. One is balance of power, the classical approach. The other one is collective security. Well, and what we are these days discussing as about the new international order and the mechanisms of new international order, global governance is about collective security in a wide sense. Unfortunately, this does not work that well. So we might be left with balance of power. So if that is so, how do we balance China? There are, if you allow me one more sentence, you know, there are many observers in the world who say that historically China has always been, well, tempted by a kind of continental power, I mean a continental power, but now they have only seldom been a maritime power. And the question today is, do they want to become again, or to become a major maritime power? Which of course will have over decades an immense implications. So even though I assume that you cannot answer my question, I ask it to you, maybe one way to answer would be, if I may say respectfully, so how do your experts in the Philippines analyze this challenge?
I guess on one level, we can say that, and before I answer, I have to have a disclaimer that I was not authorized by Beijing to speak on their behalf. And all of these things are, at the most, informed thought at best. One school of thought probably says there are a lot of historical issues that they have had to swallow over the years. And I think we read the same history books. There is the legitimate, perhaps, need for them to be able to defend their interests. Now, from having that defensive capability, of course, the thin line between defensive and offensive comes in the forefront. I don't think anybody is suggesting at this point in time that they are on the march for world domination. No. But at the same time, perhaps the more real risk is there were quite a series of unexpected developments when the oil rig was brought to the waters contested with Vietnam. The actions and reactions by both sides were not expected, but they did result in what the Americans would say, playing chicken with quite a lot of number of people playing it at the same time. One has to wonder what happens if there really is a serious miscalculation and there are lives that are at stake, and how exactly effective are the brakes that can be applied. So we have been trying to engage them. They say they are ready to engage us, but only on a bilateral basis. And our response has been, in the question of this territorial dispute, it's a multilateral problem. If two parties of the 6 agree, how does that bind the other 4? So we're saying, isn't ASEAN a very good route? We have 4 of the 6 there already. We agree amongst ourselves. Then we get to talk. But every side, I think, has been trying to, in various degrees, trying to achieve the retention of dialogue that hopefully we'll seek to manage this. Now, if there are more voices that are saying, we are halfway around the world and we are also feel threatened by these actions, then perhaps lending that voice will be an effective break before we get to a situation that nobody wants. Now, as to what will drive them, then of course domestic politics will probably be at the forefront, and where they have to satisfy their constituencies will be a prime mover of the directions that they will take. And perhaps that is true for any government in the world.
I would like to ask those who would like to ask questions not to hesitate. Amiral Bétermier, par exemple. Alors, allez-y, oui. Vous présentez, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. President, my name is Wesley Romain. I'm a student in France. So, maligayang pagdating po sa inyo sa France.
Perhaps we can recruit you for the Philippine basketball team since you're talking Tagalog already.
Gusto ko pero hindi ako magaling. My first question is regarding national security. Well, regarding security sector reform and peace-building issues in the Philippines, and especially sa Mindanao, do you think that France could play a role? And yung pangalawang tanong ay, pagtatapos ng conference, pwede bang gumawa isang picture sa inyo? Marami pong salamat.
Paano ka natuto ng Tagalog?
Kasi pusong Pinoy.
Sorry?
No,
Asawa Pinoy?
hindi po. Estudyante ako sa Maynila, sa UP Diliman po.
UP Diliman. Okay, thank you. Yung second question, of course, no? You can have time for that. Sorry, nakalimutan ko tuloy. First question was?
Security sector reform in the Philippines and peace-building issues. Do you think that France could play a role?
Yes.
Especially that in the Philippines, the Armed Force of the Philippine AFP and the Philippine Air Force, you have only 2 C-130. So, yes.
Actually, it's 3 C-130s now. I started out with one. We're negotiating for 2 more. And I think we have bought medium lift transport aircraft from a subsidiary or component of Airbus to meet the needs. Can France help in the peace building efforts? I understand it has been helping for quite a long time, and other countries within the EU have been part of what we call the international monitoring team. But even beyond that, they have been sharing their own experiences of for instance, in Spain, they were showing us the autonomous regions, no? And how an autonomous region can work and coexist with a strong central government. Our legislators actually went to Spain, observed, learned quite a number of lessons, and are utilizing these lessons now as they tackle the the Bangsamoro Basic Law, which we hope to have ratified in a plebiscite, hopefully by the end of this year. In terms of if the security measures, improving our capabilities to defend ourselves, of course, no. France is an acknowledged leader of so many different items, amongst them even radar systems and the like for maritime domain awareness issues. But at the same time, we do not want to neglect the butter side again. We were at, I'm going to mispronounce it, but the SAW, this afternoon. And they were showing the 3D program that they do have. And it just reminded me that, for instance, when we want to lay out a new street in the Philippines, and it so happens that this street has been there for quite a while, you will have the presence of very old trees, hundreds of years old. And the minute you say that we need to move the tree, you will have perhaps double the number needed to cover the circumference of tree huggers saying, don't you dare touch my tree. But at the same time, you have to do something about the traffic. Okay? So I was just saying, if we had this system, the software and the hardware, to be able to have a demonstration of all the variations of having the solution, then we really can come up to something. We can have that solution quickest. Now, let me just highlight. We are very optimistic about what will happen in the Bangsamoro. Amongst the commitments that have been afforded us by the MLF is the idea of transforming warriors into productive economic players. Now, Mindanao, as you know, is our land of promise, and our dream is to make that land of promises fulfilled. Again, the international community has been helping. Britain, with its experience in Northern Ireland, has given us very important inputs from the very high principle level to the nitty-gritty of policing and how the relationship is between those that have come into the peace treaty and the police forces that are existing there. So we are fortunate that the world is sharing with us their experiences so that we do not reinvent the wheel and we do not make the same mistakes. Thank you.
Amiral Détermier.
Mr. President, you are spending a lot of work and effort to mend the fence with the islands and the southern part of the Philippines. And no later than was last month, it seems there were very encouraging results with the announcement of more autonomy and political agreement, all very nice things to hear from here. But in the same time, you have the development in the direction of Asia and Asia Pacific of the Islamic State. No later to that last week, you had some extremist Islamist parties which line up with the Islamic State. How much that's the move unfolding across the South Asia and Asia Pacific could impact in your policy vis-à-vis the south of the Philippines?
Sir, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, which is the party that has the fighters that we are have engaged with, have themselves stated that they are resisting IS incursions on or encroachment into the Bangsamoro. Um, they have not pledged allegiance to the so-called caliphate. What we have in the Philippines currently are people who used to say that they were affiliates of Al Qaeda. And then now that IS seems to be in the ascendancy, they are now affiliates of the IS. And if tomorrow a new group comes about, I assume they'll be joining that group, or they will be the ones forming that new group to take over. With the forging of the agreement, we expect our partners, who actually will be taking on the policing role, and at the same time engaging in what they call normalization, or the laying down of the weapons of their fighters, to be the principal operative in terms of maintaining peace and order. They are culturally immersed. They know all of the players within that particular region. They seem to be they're situated there. There's no remote control aspect. So we subscribe to them. We subscribe to the idea that empowering them resolves a lot of these long-standing conflicts. Now, there are reports coming from our neighbors that say that, like other countries, they suspect some of their citizens of having gone to the conflict areas, either of Iraq or Syria, mostly by way of Turkey, according to the reports that we've been getting. I have not had hard documentary evidence or hard evidence that says Filipinos have already been engaged. We do recognize the threat that we have a very significant population in the Middle East. In just two countries alone, where the major concentration is in the neighborhood of something like 1.2 million, who might be, how should I put it, might be recruited, might be brainwashed by their good organizers. But we are very conscious of that. We have not really had an incident. Can I just retract that last statement? It might be inviting them. We've not had an instance, for instance, of a suicide bombing in our country. It is not part of the culture. When there is conflict, somehow it has to devolve also into a personal level, rather than one based on ideology or religious extremism. Now, perhaps to combat that fully, if all our citizens are fully engaged and they have a stake within the system, and this is brought about by correcting all of the ills that we have in terms of governance, number one, but also on the other hand of really enabling them to participate in the economic gains that were happening, then there is very little call for them to be disillusioned and to be swayed by all of these ideologies that really are not, shall we say, a solution to any of the issues or problems that they face. Having said that, we will not let our hands down. No? We will continue to guard, because this threat is a threat that we all face. No? The inability to dialogue, the inability to be reasonable, to have logic as an operative mode of discussions should really bother any and all of us. Thank you.
Yes, I am Bang Chen from Group X Vietnam. I have two questions for the president. In fact, what are the role of Philippines and Vietnam in the regional power balance in the context that now the U.S. is back to Asia and the Japan translate its constitution in another way, and recently in France, in the Senate, they report of a roadmap for France to come back to Southeast Asia in 2 years. And my second question is that now China reinforced military positions in Spratly and refused to keep the status of on the disputed island. And how we can interpret this move, and the next, how, for example, the country in ASEAN, normally Philippines and Vietnam, how we can work together to resolve the question. Thank you.
The Philippines and Vietnam have been working together for quite some time. it seems we alternate as being who the favorite is at the month. Now, but I guess on the one hand, it is a common problem, and the plenty of countries being drawn into it, being forced to participate in it, is in a sense a helpful sign. No? An ignored problem really will make the minor player be trifled with, no? The conditions set up. Now, having said that, we really should be conscious of developing an attitude of us against them. We shouldn't put them, again, the Americans would say, don't paint them into a corner where they have no other options. So, having said that, no, your leaders, for instance, in some of our dialogues during the ASEAN Forum have said they will never give up their rights. And we in the Philippines also want to say, we will not give up our rights, and we are ready to help defend others, no, whose rights are being trampled with. Because, again, may I quote from the speech, my father did say, at least that, and I'm sure he studied this in other matters, when we ignore the violations of rights of one group, eventually they will get around to violating our rights. So the best time to intercede would be at the onset of the initial violation of the right, rather than when it is such a big behemoth that is so difficult to stop. And I think we are putting that into practice also. But again, let me emphasize, there is no point in painting us and a situation of us against them. No, it should be, I think, more sincere or harder efforts to say, if we do not address the legitimate concerns of each other, no, then the only thing we are building is increased instability for all. And how does anyone profit from this? And if you lead your people into a worse situation than what you found them in, how long do you actually stay in power? So, at the end of the day, this is the correct course to go through. There is truth in our positions, and in time, that will happen. Thank you.
I think it's about 10 minutes or so. So any other requests for questions? Well, waiting for that, I have two, I have more than two, but one is, you mentioned, of course, a number of times ASEAN. I think it would be interesting to have your assessment of ASEAN as a regional organization. Do you think it is getting stronger? Does it is the trend towards more politics and not only economics? How does it compare to the European Union in terms of ambitions? So that's my first question. And the second one is, well, you mentioned, of course, the United States, but not much. So going back to my earlier remarks on balance of power, would it be correct to say that the United States remains the great balancer, so in terms of equilibrium in Asia? And do you share the feeling of mistrust that has tended to spread a little bit over about the United States? I mean under Obama's term. Again, I understand that it is not easy for you as president of the country to answer especially the second question, but nevertheless, I ask it.
Well, sir, in fairness to the Americans, things that we have agreed upon, and shall we say, major steps in saying certain things publicly, in agreements that we have entered into, we have no complaints at this point in time. Perhaps having said that, we tend as a culture to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, and we want to examine what is doable and what is not doable. And if they avoid even doing that which is eminently doable, then that's when we start questioning our relationship. But on the other hand, if we make a reasonable request and it's done, and in the same token, if they make a reasonable request, and it is not done immediately, then they can call our sincerity into an issue. At this point in time, in fairness to President Obama, Secretary of State Kerry, and even the Vice President, for instance, I'll share this with you. The Vice President was talking about our contingent in Liberia, and they were asking if there was any help that they could extend to us so that we finish the term of duty given the Ebola scare. And we said, we need to know all the information you have and really have a realistic assessment of what the threats are on our peacekeepers there. And to it, they have instructed their CDC to get in touch with the Department of Health to give us all of the latest data and all of the latest threat profiles. Now, I'm sorry, having concentrated on the difficult question, I forgot the first question again. ASEAN. In a sense, I think we're moving in the right direction. Look, the setup in ASEAN is, if one of the members objects to anything that the rest want to do, then the one objecting carries a veto power over the entire body. And I think there have been, especially I have participated. There have been more instances than not wherein ASEAN lived up to its dream of being a unified bloc, not just in terms of the economic side of the picture, but even in making clear statements with our dialogue partners of where we want to go to, and of representing the 600 million rather than having the biggest voice saying that this is our voice and representing it as the voice of everybody else. There seems to be really more the channeling of strengths and capabilities to address weaknesses amongst the other members. It's very easy for any state within ASEAN to say it has a problem and to expect everybody's help, because the problems are infinitely equal, the same, identical within the bloc. So same problems, solutions with various fine-tuning for socio-cultural, political issues. But at the end of the day, I think we have been marching more or less to the same tune rather than going our own separate ways in a lot of the issues that have confronted us.
And is there any potential for expansion of ASEAN?
I think even with the dialogue partners, there is a pause, especially because we're negotiating so many free trade agreements. But there are candidates who are close, I think, but not yet fully ready. And that has been a consensus, even with the party that has wanted to join us. They want to achieve a certain level of development before joining us to take care of the demands that will be placed upon them when they do become full members.
And since you mentioned trade agreements, would you say that the TPP is essentially a trade initiative or a political initiative? Which takes us back to China, of course.
So I think it
Both.
again, I'm a student of economics. That was my formal major in college, and I'm told that the bigger the market, the better for the economy. So our direction is those that the agreements that will not put us at a severe disadvantage, where clearly there is a benefit, we should endeavor to join. When we join trade agreements, it is not a political statement, but rather it has to be founded on an economic factor. Perhaps in a recent history, my predecessor used to decide on every issue on the basis of political considerations. Does this maintain the loyalty of my allies in Congress, for instance, for me to retain power? Does this, it was always that, build this road because it brings in an increase in GDP in that area, or an increase in productivity in that area by. That was a secondary issue, if at all. So we are very conscious of making economic decisions based on political details. we think that is a wrong route to go to.
So I think we have time maybe for one last question. So, Madam.
Magandang gabi po, sir. Good evening, Mr. President. My name is Marilu Pasio-Deville. I'm a Filipino working for an oil and gas company in France. I have two things. The first question is, as we have seen millions of Filipinos working in other countries for greener pastures, I would like to ask if you have a progressive policy that could welcome and ensure the sustainability of foreign companies that wish to do business in the Philippines, that could likewise sustain employment for young graduates and professionals like me. The second question is, tulad po nung estudyante sa Diliman, gusto ko po magpa-picture after. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
With regards to the first question, sustainability. For instance, we have rolled out we have rolled out and awarded actually 8 public-private partnership projects. No? Now, and my economic managers point out that the 8 is greater than the 6 that were launched by. These are solicited proposals. The 6 that were done by my predecessors. I'm sure you're familiar with PESA. Started in 1995. We are already at 40. Sorry, I need the number. 40 what? 42. 42% of all investments in PESA. PESA is the Philippine Economic Zone Authority. These are the agency in charge of the special economic zones. Started in 1995. And at this point in time, 42% of all investments from the time it started to now came under our watch. Now, we think the Secretary of Trade is, I think, if I remember correctly, promised that we will surpass. It will not be 50-50. No? It will be reversed in our favor in the remaining 2 years or so. Now, but having said that, when it took a while to roll out the PPP policy, amongst the things that we had to do was ensure that the investors would be shielded from regulatory risk. We want to have a stable regulatory regime. The terms and conditions when they entered in should not be dramatically altered. And then that's one of them. Now, okay. You will notice in the bidding for all of these projects that there is a very wide field of bidders. Primarily, and that we believe is proof that they find that our promise of the level playing field has been done, number one. That it's actually a question of what you know that decides the matter rather than who you know. And at the end of the day, whoever produces the most benefit for our people gets the nod, regardless of whether wherever it came from. Now, how do we ensure? Again, you have an economy that's been growing on average about 6.3%. You have the certainty of being able to, you perform your analysis, your due diligence to ensure the commercial risks. At the end of the day, you are not prevented from making a profit. If it's a profitable venture, why will they choose to go elsewhere where there are less potentials? Now, and on top of that, of course, all of the investments we've been doing with our the youth in particular. When I started out, I don't know if you're aware of a website called PhilJobNet. This website is basically lists down vacancies and applicants. Applicants can go into the website and apply. And on any given month, the reports by our Department of Labor kept telling me, you had 200,000 openings and 100,000 applicants. Then I had to ask, when people say they don't have jobs and there are at least half of the jobs posted there that cannot be met, what is the issue? And then there was that mismatch of skills. So from the early onset, we have directed the Commission on Higher Education, TESDA, DOLE, DTI also assists to get a dialogue going. What skills do you need and when do you need it? And how much of this, how many personnel do you actually need, do you actually foresee? So that our countrymen don't go chasing after the jobs that were hot when they were enrolled initially and to have it disappear afterwards. Now, so in the sectors where we're very strong, the BPO sector, for instance, and other service areas, and now even in manufacturing, you will have a government that is supportive, has been doing the same. You have both of labor and of business. You have clear-cut rules that are getting even more refined so that there is less and less ambiguity present. And again, just can I just, because I'm trying to leave some surprises when I get home, when I report to our countrymen and the bosses. But the bottom line is, I thought after 4 years I'd be a little jaded about, people say we'll invest, they say thank you, and it comes. I didn't think I'd be surprised at the extent of the investments and even the suggestions as to what we should take. And I'm not the only one surprised. Some of the cabinet secretaries have kept on saying, first time we've ever heard such a dialogue. Now, you know me, I don't promise what cannot be delivered. So, and we also have that superstition that if you say ahead of time that which is forthcoming, the positive, you jinx it's arriving. So I will refrain from talking about it, and we'll just point to it when it is in full bloom and full reality. Thank you.
So to end, I will ask you a question that I asked President Hollande recently, which is the following one. You know, how much of your time do you spend on foreign affairs? Of your working time, of course.
Sir, sometimes
I will give you President Hollande's answer.
Yes, but sometimes even the sleeping hours are occupied by foreign concerns. And let me explain that. We have 10 million, or about 10% of our population, working as overseas Filipino workers. Whenever there's an incident anywhere in the world, and it might not necessarily war, it's a landslide, a flood, etc., a tornado. First question, and this is required of our post ambassador will bear me up. Any Filipinos involved? No. How are they involved? Are they in any particular danger? Okay. Then, of course, when we have issues of the Philippines in particular with its neighbors, no? How does this impact our countrymen there, elsewhere? The Golden Heights, we have a battalion, about 350 or so peacekeepers there. We've been there for 5 years. And as I mentioned earlier, Liberia, I think we were observers also in the South Sudan. Then I said, I wonder who picked all of these assignments. There seems to be a predisposition to getting the worst assignments. But again, how much? You know, perhaps I can answer you when I get back home, and I'll try to have a journal, because it seems it's not really a question of what problems I get. It's just a question of which problem I tackle. Because when I finish at the office and you breathe a sigh of relief, the day is over. Normally there are documents awaiting me in my bedroom talking about the latest intelligence reports on happenings in the Middle East, and they're all marked urgent, sometimes very urgent. And they're loaded with a lot of Scotch tape, you know, to ensure that are signed, to ensure that nobody else read it. And again, it's a 24/7 thing. And so I won't say half enough, but perhaps 20 to 30% on a daily basis is devoted to foreign matters. In fact, I'm given a daily situational, and for the most part of significant events, domestic and internationally. And it would not be a stretch of the imagination to say that the intelligence brief normally carries about between 70 to 80% foreign. And sometimes I think they just give me a report on domestic occurrences to be compliant with the directives to know what's happening domestically.
So President Hollande's answer was 50%. Well, I think it fits more or less with what you say. So, Mr. President, I want to thank you very much indeed. I think it was the most interesting moment. I wish you well in your country and during this trip and beyond, and I hope that there will be many other meetings at Ifri with prominent people from your country. Thank you very much, and I hope this is not the last time.
Thank you so much.
And please, May I ask you to remain seated just the time I go with the President to his car, and then you will be free, but not immediately.
I have to
Wait.
pictures. No, I have to fulfill the promise.